During the affectionate retrospective segment of the wedding, my husband, with just one glance, at his eyes turn red, snatched up a stool and frantically smashed the screen to pieces. I stood on the wedding stage, laughing with tears streaming down my face. I was the one who played the video, and I had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Mr. Aura and Mr. Matthew love each other deeply and are in perfect harmony. Let's take a look at the little bits and pieces of their love story together. The MC said slowly. Matthew held my hand tightly. His handsome eyes were filled with anticipation. His usually serious face now raised its eyebrows, and he smiled brazenly. He whispered in my ear, "Aurora, we also have wonderful memories between us." Wonderful memories. Did he mean the time when Matthew held my head in the water tank for 5 minutes, or the time when he locked me in a cage? After Matthew fell in love with me, whoever had watched my performance, he would bring ruin to their families. He said that with him around, no one in Shangcheng would dare to speak ill of me. I glanced at the celebrities and wealthy people present. They all wore smiles of blessing on their faces, but a flash of mockery crossed their eyes. How ridiculous! The young master of Shangcheng, Matthew, had married a plaything who had once been locked in a cage and laughed at by others. As the music of love stories started to play softly, Matthew raised his head and looked at the screen expectantly. Then, a noisy electronic siren rang out. Instead of the wedding photos of Matthew and me, that should have been on the screen, there was now a video of me being violently abused in the video. I was crying so hoarsely. The picture was clear, and the sound was loud. It was really thanks to Matthew. He was the one who recorded this video himself. As soon as the video appeared, Matthew's eyes instantly turned red. He was like a frenzied beast. Matthew snatched up the stool and slammed it into the big screen. He seemed to have gone crazy, smashing the screen into pieces again and again. I stood on the stage, laughing with tears streaming down my face. I said, "Happy wedding. Matthew, this is the wedding gift I prepared for you. Do you like it?" I covered my lower abdomen and almost laughed so hard that my stomach hurt. But no one in the audience dared to whisper. Everyone in the wealthy circle of Shangcheng knew how dirty and despicable I was supposed to be in their eyes. And no one dared to laugh at me. Matthew was trying to make up for what he had done, but I could never forget on my 22nd birthday. The curtain of the cage was drawn open. I was huddled in the cage. Having been starved for 3 days, they threw live chicken at me. How loudly they laughed at that time. And now, why aren't they laughing anymore? I wasn't good at studying since I was a child and was rather slow. In the year of the college entrance examination, I got into a junior college, while my younger sister was admitted to a key university. Unfortunately, my father, riding a motorcycle with my mother, had a fatal accident and died. I patted my head and said to my younger sister, "Sis, you go to college. I'll support you." My sister cried and said she wanted to go to the factory and work with me, but I scolded her harshly. I still remembered it. Summer in a rented room. My sister swore to me that she would surely make a name for herself and not let down my sacrifice. My sister needed 3,000 yuan for tuition and 1,000 yuan for living expenses for college, so I went to work, taking on all kinds of jobs. At first, I had no experience and just knew how to serve dishes and wash bowls. I didn't earn much, so I lived frugally and saved the money for my sister. Actually, eating instant noodles wasn't really saving money. Do you know what the most cost-effective thing to eat is? It's dried noodles. I could make a pack of dried noodles that cost 7 yuan last for a whole week. When I cooked the dried noodles and added a little vinegar, and was enjoying the meal, my sister called and asked, "Sis, what are you eating?" I held the phone close to my face and smiled, saying, "I'm eating at Wallace. The burgers are so delicious, you should buy some and try them too." Wallace, where you could get 3 burgers for 10 yuan, was a luxury for my sister and me when we graduated from high school. I walked around the Wallace store 3 times but still couldn't bear to buy her a burger. My sister was very competitive. She also studied hard in college once. I went to her school with big and small bags of snacks to visit her. She was drinking free soup in the cafeteria, breaking the steamed buns into small pieces, and soaking them in the soup. My tears welled up immediately. I walked over and ordered a chicken chop rice for her. The chicken chop rice cost 12 yuan, but my sister insisted that she couldn't finish it. How could she not finish it? The chicken chop wasn't even as big as her palm. We shared it, taking turns to have a bite later. I thought I couldn't go on like this. I was unturning enough since I didn't have a high education. I decided to become a food delivery personal, though being a food delivery person was tough and tiring. I could earn more money just when I started to earn more. Something happened to my sister. It was raining that day. There were more people ordering food deliveries on rainy days while I was riding my small yellow motorcycle all over the street. My sister's counselor called me. "Are you Serafina's sister?" Serafina got into a fight with her classmates. I just couldn't believe that my sister had gotten into a fight. My sister was such an honest person that she could barely say a word even when pushed when a boy in elementary school burned her hair with a lighter while sitting behind her. She didn't even dare to tell the teacher. I quickly rode my motorcycle to my sister's school. The rain was so heavy that the motorcycle skidded, and I fell down on the way. My knee was scraped and bleeding. I was in a hurry and didn't care. I picked up the motorcycle and rushed forward when I got to the school. I saw my sister standing in the corner of the counselor's office. She bit her lip and didn't shed a tear as he just silently looked at the 3 girls in front of the counselor. Those 3 girls were all dressed nicely. They clearly looked like kids from the city. They were chattering away, listing my sister's so-called faults to the counselor. She never goes to our dormitory gatherings. She's so withdrawn when we talk to her. She just gives us the cold shoulder. We asked her which celebrity she liked, and she didn't say a word. She gets up at 7 in the morning, which really disturbs our rest. We wanted to pool money in our dormitory to buy an air conditioner, and she actually said she didn't have the money. Is there really someone who can't even afford a few $100 nowadays? The counselor was a young man. He couldn't handle so many female students. He adjusted his glasses and stammered, "Well, you can't just lock Miss Serafina outside the dormitory for a whole night either." They locked my sister outside the dormitory for a whole night. I immediately latched onto this crucial point and fixed my gaze on the 3 gorgeously dressed girls. The girl in the lead had pink painted nails with Elena stickers on them. She batted her eyes and mumbled. We were all asleep. Who could have heard her knocking? My sister stood in the corner. When she saw me arrive, her tears started to fall patter by patter. My sister had been like this since she was a child. When there was no one to stand up for her, she didn't feel wronged. Only when she saw her doting sister did all her grievances well up instantly. With red-rimmed eyes, she said, "Sorry, sis. I caused you trouble." I wiped her eyes and said, "It's not you who caused me trouble. It's others who were picking on us." I strode over aggressively, slammed the yellow helmet in my hand onto the table, and roared at the counselor. "How do you even teach? They locked my sister outside the dormitory, and you're not going to punish them. They didn't do it on purpose. They just didn't hear." The counselor tried to play peacemaker, his voice getting softer and softer. The 3 girls were taken aback and huddled together, pointing at me and whispering, "She's such a shrew, isn't she? The quality of people from the lower classes is really low. So scary. I hope I never run into someone like her in my life." They were all from the city and were so polite, while I was from the countryside. And I was the shrew. I didn't care about anything else. I just didn't want my sister to be bullied. I said, "I don't care. I sent my sister here safely, and you locked her outside. You have to give me an explanation today." The counselor tried to persuade me while still playing the middleman, but I wouldn't let it go. Finally, the girl named Elena, who was the ringleader, got angry. She walked over to me aggressively and said, "It takes two to tango. Why don't we all like Serafina? Isn't it her own fault? My sister was an honest and timid girl when she was a little girl. She would cry for 3 days straight when the chicken she raised died. What wrong could she have done?" I immediately flew into a rage on an impulse. I slapped Elena across the face. I never expected that this slap would ruin the rest of my sisters in my lives. The girl started crying and making a fuss, but I ignored her. I pressured the counselor to change my sister's dormitory. After the counselor changed my sister's dormitory and I gave my sister a few more words of advice, I went home and only then realized that a lot of blood had flowed from the wound on my knee and it had stuck to my pants. The wound on my knee was stuck to the pants, and when I peeled it off, the pain made my teeth chatter. I casually found some alcohol, applied some medicine, and then fell asleep in the middle of the night. I was awakened by a noisy knocking on the door. I lived in an urban village where the rent was 300 yuan a month. The landlord's family lived right across from me. I thought it was the landlord coming to find me. When I opened the door, 3 men were standing in front of me. They quickly covered my mouth and restrained me. I smelled a scent similar to medical alcohol. And then everything went black before my eyes when I woke up. I was in a filthy warehouse, surrounded by dusty machines and sundries. A man was sitting in front of me, with one leg crossed over the other, his collar open, revealing his chest. His sword-shaped eyebrows were raised high, and there was a small break at the end of his left eyebrow. "Aurora, you hit my girlfriend. Do you know who I am?" At that time, I didn't know who he was, and I was still being stubborn. I said, "So what if I hit her? What are you going to do about it? You can hit me back if you want." I never imagined that he was Matthew, the richest and most powerful young master in the entire Shangcheng. He didn't really like his girlfriend all that much, he just suddenly felt like tormenting someone. And unfortunately, that someone was me. That day, he asked me, "Which hand did you use to hit Zhang Zhang?" Before I could say anything, he suddenly stepped on my palm with his leather shoe. I let out a scream of pain. He was smoking a cigarette, looking at me with raised eyebrows as if he were admiring the scenery. While his foot mercilessly crushed my hand, I was shivering with pain. But I was too stubborn to beg for mercy. "Interesting. Aren't you?" He looked at me as I gritted my teeth and broke out in cold sweat. He casually pressed the cigarette, but onto my forehead there was a hissing sound, and I felt as if a hole had been burned on my forehead. The pain made me want to roll on the ground. "You've got some backbone, don't you? I wonder if your sister has the same backbone as you." When he mentioned my sister, I immediately backed down. My sister was afraid of pain. But I wasn't. I couldn't let my sister suffer. It was all my fault for being so impulsive and hitting that girl. Why did I do it? I knelt on the ground, trembling, and started knocking my head on the ground with a thud. "Brother, it's my fault. Please don't go after my sister. It's all my fault," I said shakily, constantly knocking my head on the ground. My head was buzzing, but I only had one thought in my mind. I had to protect my sister. "Fine. I won't go after your sister, but I still haven't vented all my anger," the man said as he pulled me up. He looked at me with a somewhat cunning smile. "If you can hold out until the end without crying, I'll let your sister go." He clapped his hands and 3 men surrounded me. I can't remember how I survived that day. I remember crying. I remember wriggling on the ground like a fish on a chopping block. I remember being beaten up. So much blood flowed from my nose that at first I could smell the metallic scent, but later I couldn't smell anything. They were really ruthless when it came to beating a woman. My hand was being crushed under a leather shoe. But I didn't cry. I was slapped while they pulled my hair. But I didn't cry. They twisted my arm violently behind my back. And still I didn't cry. "Matthew got bored with it. He said, 'This isn't fun. She won't cry. Bring her sister here and torture them together.'" Instantly, I burst into tears. My tears mixed with the blood and dirt and fell to the ground. I clung to Matthew's leg and said, "I'm sorry. I was wrong. Please spare my sister." People like Matthew were not the kind I would normally come across. His family's connections were intricate. And he was the one who had the final say in Shangcheng. If he wanted to toy with me, no one could save me. It wasn't that I hadn't thought about going to the police the moment I started lingering around the police station. Matthew sent me photos of my sister. He choked me by the neck and said, "I'll let you go when I'm tired of playing with you." The wealthy always have all sorts of whims. Once he got this new and exciting thing, he couldn't wait to show it off to others. At first, I was resentful and refused to listen to him. As a result, he tried his best to make my life a living hell. He held me down in the sink for 5 minutes. He locked me in a dog cage, starved me for 3 days, and then threw in a chicken. Did you think I could stand up to his power and persevere through gritted teeth? Unfortunately, I'm not that strong or great. I learned to submit. Only by submitting could I avoid being tortured to the extreme. I had already done things that made me lose all my dignity before, Like when I handed out flyers after graduating from high school and begged people to leave their phone numbers when Matthew saw that I had submitted. He stopped tormenting me. There were many times when I endured it all. Every night, I would look at the stars outside the window and calculate when I could end my life. As long as I could support my younger sister through college, I would die. What was the point of my existence? Because Matthew was controlling me. I couldn't work as a food delivery person to earn money, and I didn't want my sister to know about my current situation. So I swallowed my pride and begged Matthew for some money. I remember clearly the mocking look in Matthew's eyes that day. He curled his lips, pinched my face, and said, "So you know to come to me for something now? You have to pay the price for what you want." He was drunk that day, and his ears were completely red. I was shivering as I tugged at the buttons of his shirt. He threw me to the ground and called me dirty. I wasn't discouraged. With tears in my eyes, I hugged his legs. I knew how despicable I looked at that moment, but I had no choice. I had to get money for my sister. I knew I was still quite good-looking. Many people offered to support me when I was working part-time. Matthew couldn't resist my beauty either. I don't know how I got through that night, Matt. You pressed me in the bathtub and scrubbed me hard with a brush. After that day, Matthew became addicted to what he had done. I didn't have to sleep in the cage in his room anymore, which was where his Tibetan mastiff used to sleep before. He let me sleep in his bed and held me tightly at night. He combed my hair just like he was grooming a dog and bought me beautiful clothes to dress me up. He said, "You're just like that Tibetan mastiff I met when I was a kid." Yes, that's exactly how my Tibetan mastiff looked at me. With its eyes all wet, it was raised together with a mongrel by people who didn't know its worth when it was young. I really liked that Tibetan mastiff. I hit it hard with a stick, trying to tame it and make it protect me. That Tibetan mastiff is so much like you. Even though its fur was stained with blood from my beating, it still tried to protect that mongrel. I didn't say a word. Matthew held my face and asked me, "You know, the way you're suffering with me for your sister is such a great love. Just like that stupid dog." Matthew loved listening to me talk on the phone with my sister the most. He said my voice was so gentle that it could drip with sweetness. He said, "Aurora, say something like that to me too. I want to hear it. Under pressure." I awkwardly said a few words. Matthew didn't find it awkward at all. He enjoyed it very much and said, "Aurora, treat me as well as you treat your sister." I also lack someone who is truly sincere to me by my side. I concealed everything very well. No one knew about the things Matthew had done to me, or how I had lost my dignity. One moment I was being pulled around by my hair by Matthew, and the next moment I could smile brightly and have a video call with my sister. I asked my sister how she was doing. She said she was doing great. That everyone in the dormitory was nice to her, and that I didn't have to worry. I believed her, truly believed her. Later, my sister jumped off a building. That's when I found out that the girl named Elena hadn't let my sister go. She said she had lost some money and spread the rumor that my sister was a thief. A stack of money was found under my sister's bed in the dormitory. All the girls in the class isolated my sister. All of them. No one talked to my sister. Before class, the books my sister placed in the front row would be thrown to the back. No one wanted to team up with her for group assignments. My sister endured it every day. She didn't want to tell me because she didn't want to cause me trouble because I had told her before. We don't have parents anymore, so we can't get into trouble. There's no one to clean up our messes. My sister listened to me so much. She loved me the most then. Elena sent the video of my humiliation to my sister. Elena said, "Look, Serafina, this is your sister. Your sister is a..." She pursed her lips and said a single word. That was the first time my sister lost her temper. She fought with Elena like she had gone crazy. Elena said, "I heard from Brother Matthew that your sister has a really stubborn temper. But she softens up the moment your name is mentioned." My sister, such a smart girl, understood everything instantly. She jumped off the 16th floor. 16 floors. I remember my sister once pointed at a tall building and said to me, "Sis, I'll take you to live in a tall building in the future." I hugged her and said, "That I'm counting on you, sister." She jumped without the slightest hesitation and sent me a text message before she did. She said, "Sis, I can't drag you down anymore." I went crazy when I heard the news. At that time, the school said my sister had depression and easily swept the matter under the rug. I knelt at the school gate and hung a white banner. Matthew took me away and said, "Don't embarrass me outside." At that time, Matthew still didn't care. He said, "Your sister is dead, just focus on treating me well now." I was so angry that I rushed at him for the first time and bit him hard. Matthew was in pain and kicked me aside. I lay on the ground and wailed. Matthew was afraid I would go crazy, so he came over to comfort me and said, "The dead can't be brought back to life. You have to move on." Matthew tried to soothe my hysterical state and helped me look into this matter. It turned out that Elena was the culprit. Matthew had sent my video to Elena as a trophy, which was how Elena managed to show the video to my younger sister Matthew. Then had people hold Eleanor down. But what good did it do? My younger sister, the one who would even share a small piece of chicken chop with me, the one who, despite being a computer major, didn't buy a computer and instead went to the library to use the computers there just to avoid causing me trouble, the one who lied to me during the summer vacation, saying she was staying at school to study but was actually working a summer job, she was dead. After my sister passed away, I came down with a high fever. Matthew hired a private doctor to give me an injection. He held me in his arms as I burned with fever and said, "Aurora, I won't let you die, you still have to stay with me." I didn't want to take the medicine. I secretly hid the pills in my palm and then threw them under the bed. I loathed this world, I loathed Matthew. And I hated those wealthy people who casually bullied others. When I wanted to die, Matthew asked me, "Don't you want to get revenge?" His broken eyebrow was tightly furrowed. And he said, "Aren't you quite tenacious? Your sister is dead. Don't you want to avenge her?" Matthew's words pulled me back. Revenge. Revenge. My sister was killed by 3 people. The first one was Elena. Matthew wiped the tears from my face and said, "Aurora, be with me. I'll help you get revenge." I don't know when it was that Matthew stopped calling me a dog and stopped cursing at me instead. He started calling me Aurora. He wanted me to be with him. Matthew's words weren't a question for him. He never cared about my answer. He just did whatever he wanted. Matthew said, "Aurora, from now on, you have to be as good to me as you were to your sister." He hugged my head and kept emphasizing the weight of the Ward family. To me, Matthew had no family. Since he was a child, he knew that he had many older and younger brothers. Only the child who was most like his father could be taken home and become an official son of the Smith family. Matthew's mother was very strict. Matthew would be locked in a dark room and punished, even for walking in the wrong posture. Your father never walked that fast. If he walked too fast, she would whip his calves with a stick, and the pain would make him learn to correct it. Matthew had raised many dogs from a young age. He knew how to order those dogs to bite his other brothers. But when those brothers tried to kill him, those dogs that were supposed to be loyal all scattered and fled, failing to protect him. His mother, who had raised him since he was a child, jumped out of the window and ran away as she left. She even complained, "I should have known he was so useless. I shouldn't have wasted my time on him." After the attack that night, Matthew survived and was taken back to the Smith family. He became the sole heir of the Smith family. After Mr. Smith died of a heart attack, Matthew became the head of the Smith family. The Tibetan Mastiff that Matthew liked the most was never tamed by him in the end. After Matthew killed that Tibetan Mastiff, he stopped keeping dogs. Matthew said, "It was a good dog, but it was a pity that it didn't choose me." After saying that, he looked at me with a dangerous glint in his eyes and asked, "What do you think, Aurora?" Matthew was decisive and deficient in his action. She took Elena to the warehouse that I had been to before. However, the people who tied up Elena weren't the same 3 who had tied me up before. I asked Matthew what had happened to those 3 people, and Matthew's face darkened menacingly as he said, "I got rid of them." I knew that Matthew had a lot of dirty deeds on his hands. Elena was in a filthy state. Her long nails with kink nail polish had long since been broken, and her fingers were bloody, clearly showing that she had been tortured. Elena lied pitifully. She kept begging for mercy and calling Matthew's name, hoping that Matthew would show mercy to her for old time's sake. Matthew acted as if he didn't hear her and told those people to continue. Only then did I realize that there were so many ways to torture someone. They put the person in a sack, hung it up, and then punched the sack while wearing boxing gloves at first. You could hear the screams coming from the sack. But later there was no sound. My hands couldn't stop shaking. Matthew held a cigarette between his lips and said, "Do you want to take a few punches?" I shook my head, and tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. I was too scared. Elena wasn't an ordinary person from the lower class like me. Her family had some money. But even such a wealthy and beautiful woman, Matthew said he would deal with her. And he did. The power behind him was unfathomable. Shangcheng was close to the border and far from the central area. The Smith family was the dominant force here. When Matthew saw me crying out of fear, he hugged me and laughed heartily, saying, "Look how scared you are. Aurora, you're just too timid if you're going to be my woman. You have to be braver." That night, I had nightmares all night long. I came to a profound realization that Matthew wasn't human. Could I ever defeat such a person? Matthew did it on purpose. He deliberately took me to see Elena, deliberately made me feel afraid, and used threats to maintain the relationship between us. I had to calm down. I had to be composed. Although I had been with Matthew for nearly a year, he had only recently started treating me well. I knew he had dirty secrets. But I had no evidence. Now was definitely not a good time for me to confront him. There was only one word. Wait. I had to lie low by his side, like a harmless little animal, offering my soft belly for him to stroke at any time. And then bite him when he wasn't paying attention. There would be only one chance, and I had to strike to kill after Elena disappeared. The police came around several times. Elena's parents also caused a stir a few times, but in the end, the conclusion was that Elena had gone abroad for an online romance and had been kidnapped by someone. No one suspected Matthew. There weren't any people dying in Shangcheng. All of them dying while attempting to cross the border illegally since Elena's death. I had been with Matthew for 2 years. For a full 2 years I was the only woman by Matthew's side. Matthew had a strong sense of control and possessiveness. After being with him, I hardly ever spoke to any man other than him, and he erased everything that had happened 3 years ago, those who had watched my performance, and laughed at me. Matthew had ruined their lives. Once, there was a woman who was jealous of me and came up to me and started talking about the past before I could even frown. The woman was immediately gagged and dragged out. Throughout Shangcheng, not a single person dared to show me a contemptuous look. Instead, they even presented me with jewelry and begged me to put in a good word for them in Matthew's ear. In the second year of my relationship with Matthew, he took me to a certain island in his private jet, and we spent a full 6 months there. Those 6 months were really wonderful for Matthew. During the day, he taught me in the villa. It seemed as if he wanted to mold me into his favorite version of myself. He taught me to read. I had always been poor at studying since I was a child. My memory wasn't great, and I didn't have a strong sense of logic. Yet Matthew insisted on teaching me management and finance. I couldn't understand a thing. It was like listening to some mysterious incantation, and I even shed tears out of frustration. Matthew, however, was overjoyed. He said, "If you can memorize even a little bit, I'll reward you." And his rewards were always kisses, hugs, and caresses. I couldn't help but wonder if it was really a reward for me or for himself. I felt nauseous, but I still had to strive to memorize the content. When Matthew was in a meeting, I often dozed off while trying to memorize. And when I woke up, Matthew would be drawing a Chinese character king on my forehead with a pen. The moment I opened my eyes, he looked a bit flustered, his ears turning red, and his eyes avoiding mine. I said, "What are you doing? You're just like those naughty boys in my old school." Matthew replied in a somewhat unfriendly but confident tone, "I've never been to school." Matthew grew up with his mother and had never attended a formal school. All his knowledge came from private tutors, and his very existence was meant for inheriting the Smith family. The Smith family was like a malignant tumor in the dark. Huge and filthy, but the allure of money was so strong that people kept flocking to join this underground kingdom. Matthew arranged a packed schedule of courses for me. He even taught me how to shoot and bought me a delicate and beautiful handgun. Standing on the shooting range, he held my hand and told me to calm down and look ahead, his eyes half closed, his narrow eyes revealing a sense of arrogance. He said, "See the head of that dummy over there?" With a bang, Matthew's marksmanship was excellent, and the glass head of the dummy opposite shattered instantly. I fired several shots but missed every time. Matthew said, "Aurora, you still have a lot to learn." I loved learning how to shoot and practiced every day at night. The wind on the island was slightly cool, and the waves crashed against the rocks, creating splashes of white foam. This was a rare moment of tranquility for Matthew and me. He would take my hand and we'd watch the sea, pick up all sorts of random stones, and then he'd hold me tightly on the cold rocks as if he wanted to merge me into his body. He'd call out my name and keep saying, "Aurora, I'm your man." I finally learned how to shoot one night, while Matthew was sound asleep. I pointed that small handgun at his forehead. I controlled my shallow breathing, but Matthew suddenly opened his eyes. In the darkness, his eyes were as dazzling as jewels. Filled with a fierce light, he suddenly grabbed the muzzle of my gun. And with a smirk on his lips, he said to me, "I can't die. If I die, I won't be able to be with you anymore." I said, "Matthew, why don't you just die? I hate you." I pulled the trigger, but the bullet didn't pierce his head as expected. That small handgun was just a toy Matthew used to amuse me. After each training session, all the bullets were collected. I once tried to hide some, but they were discovered quickly. This doomed assassination attempt was just me testing the limits of Matthew's feelings for me. Matthew sat up and hugged me. I bit his shoulder hard. So hard that I could even taste the blood. "Aurora, if I die, you'll surely marry someone else. And I can't bear that. If I were to die, I'd definitely take you with me, even if it's to hell. You have to accompany me," Matthew said with a smile. But his eyes were unwarvingly determined. He then bit my finger hard. "You ungrateful wretch." In the second year, I discovered Matthew's secrets. Matthew had multiple identities. He had used various names such as Zhang Xiaohua and Wang Zhenyuan to negotiate projects with others. He was in cahoots with drug lords at the border recently. The border area had been unstable. Matthew went out more frequently, and there were more deaths in Shangcheng. The authorities above started to take notice. A new police officer came to Shangcheng. Matthew invited him to a meal. Matthew smiled amiably and said, "You look quite young. Why didn't you go to a big city instead of coming to this remote place?" The new police officer was named Nathaniel. Nathaniel was intimidated by Matthew's imposing manner. He flinched a bit, hunched his shoulders, and his voice involuntarily dropped. Nathaniel said, "There were fewer people taking the exam here, so I applied and got in." I took a few more glances at Nathaniel. He seemed to be completely intimidated. Matthew whirled a jade thumb ring and said, "Shangcheng is a place with beautiful scenery and simple folk customs. It's not a bad place to be." As he spoke, Matthew smiled and pushed over a few pieces of jade. Jade is abundant in Shangcheng. These are just some small trinkets. You can take them to Yuan and have a look. These pieces of jade were indeed not very valuable, but if taken to Yuan, each piece could be exchanged for 300,000 yuan. Nathaniel took a quick glance but didn't dare to touch the jade, not even look at them for too long. Matthew burst into laughter. He was used to it. No one in Shangcheng dared to defy him. I remained silent and played with the tassels of my skirt with a cold expression. Matthew didn't give me a phone and wouldn't let me use a mobile phone either. When Matthew saw me playing by myself, he got unhappy again, untightly clasped my hand under the dining table. Nathaniel dropped his chopsticks, and when he bent down to pick them up, he happened to see our hands. I was annoyed and pinched Matthew's palm. Matthew, on the contrary, smiled even more brightly. After dinner, Matthew had a bit of wine. He pinned me down in the car, his dark eyes fixed on me, like a cat ready to hunt in the dead of night. "You've looked at him 13 times. What's the deal? Do you think I'm too old and you prefer to look at younger guys?" Matthew wasn't actually that old. His broken eyebrow, combined with his menacing aura, made him seem like he was in his 30s. "But he was only 28. I replied. "No, that's not it." Matthew said, sorry, his tone laced with jealousy. "He's a useless coward when I speak to him. He doesn't even dare to breathe too loudly. Is he really worth your attention?" As he spoke, he forcefully held me in place and gently kissed my forehead. "You're punished to keep your eyes on me all night tonight," he declared. I didn't have any favorable feelings towards Nathaniel firstly. He seemed as meek and spineless as the lackeys around Matthew secondly. Just because I had glanced at him a few times, Matthew punished me by making me stare at him. Which really annoyed me, however. I happened to run into Nathaniel several times every time he saw me. He would immediately lower his head, terrified, and scurry away in a hurry. He knew that I was Matthew's woman. And he was scared of Matthew. He was also afraid of making me unhappy. So whenever he saw me, he wished he could disappear into the ground. When he met Matthew, he would serve him tea and water obsequiously, nodding submissively to whatever Matthew said. There was no sign of the dignity and righteousness that a policeman should have. He was more like a frightened quail. His servile behavior towards Matthew really got on my nerves, but Matthew was delighted when he realized my distaste. He couldn't hide his smile and said, "Not every man is like your man." In the 3rd year of my relationship with Matthew, he was attentively painting my toenails while holding my foot. He had set aside his usual harshness, and with his head bowed and a gentle smile on his face, he actually looked quite tender, running his fingers over the thin calluses on the sole of my foot. He said, sounding a bit impatient, "I've been taking care of you for 3 years, and these calluses still haven't gone away." I gave him a light kick, but he didn't get angry. As Matthew continued painting my toenails, he casually mentioned, "I'm planning to give you some of my businesses. Come with me to the study tomorrow and sign some contracts." I was a bit stunned seeing my dazed expression. Matthew curled his lips into a smile, and his broken eyebrow arched high. "What's wrong? Are you so happy that you can't speak?" It wasn't that I was too happy to speak, it was just that I finally had a chance to enter the study. Matthew always received drug lords in his study, and I was sure that the evidence of his collusion with them was hidden there. After following Matthew into the study, I carefully surveyed the layout of the room. There was a safe in Matthew's study. He opened the safe and took out several contracts from it, which were proof of his assets. Noticing that my eyes were fixed on the safe, Matthew raised an eyebrow. "I bet you didn't expect me to be this rich," he said. He casually handed me a few documents and said, "Pick whatever you like from these. I'll give you whatever catches your fancy." "I want them all," I said, looking straight at Matthew. I thought Matthew would frown, but instead, he pinched my face affectionately and said, "You little money grubber." Then he handed me a pen and asked me to sign the documents. In the middle of signing, Matthew received a phone call and stepped out of the study. The safe was still open, and Matthew had already left the room. The room suddenly fell silent, and I could almost hear the sound of my own swallowing. The antique wall clock ticked rhythmically, its chimes echoing in the stillness. This was clearly a trap. How could Matthew be so careless as to lay out his most important possessions in front of me like this? He had always known that I hated him, but this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If I could get hold of the evidence, I might be able to send it to the police. What should I do? Should I search the safe or not? The safe was like the devil's treasure, luring me with its temptation. I knew Matthew too well. He was far too shrewd for me to take the risk. I fought back the urge and continued to look at the open safe. The second layer of the safe contained some more folders and a few pieces of jewelry. The third layer, however, seemed rather peculiar. It held a red velvet box. Just as I was trying to get a better look at what was in the third layer, Matthew's voice suddenly rang out beside me. His voice was low and devoid of any discernible emotion. "Aurora." I pretended to be nonchalant and said, "Your safe is open." "What's in the third layer?" Matthew smiled and, right in front of me, opened the third layer of the safe. He took out the red velvet box, and only then did I see what was inside. Inside the exquisitely crafted box was a napkin folded into the shape of a rose. I remembered that rose. It was from the 2nd year of my relationship with Matthew. On his birthday, he took me to a hotel by the sea for dinner and kept asking me for a birthday present. I didn't have any affection for him at that time and was filled with disgust, so I casually picked up a napkin from the table, folded it into a rose, and threw it to him. He wasn't angry. Instead, he played with it for a while and carefully put it into his suit pocket. I heard a gulp in my throat as I said, "You've kept it all this time." "It was the first gift you ever gave me," Matthew sighed. Although there was a hint of dissatisfaction on his face, he still took the paper rose and placed it back in the box. I said casually. I'll give you more gifts in the future. There's really no need to keep this. With just that casual remark, Matthew's eyes suddenly lit up. His eyes, which usually held a fierce glint, were now filled with joy and surprise. Aurora, you said, in the future. You can't go back on your word, he said. As soon as I said those words, I regretted it. I had just said it without thinking, but Matthew was overjoyed. He hugged me tightly and refused to let go. Aurora. We will have a future together, he said. Then Matthew told me. Aurora. You're pregnant. I was pregnant. This was the most disgusting and infuriating thing that could have happened to me. The person who had killed my sister was still right in front of me. Every day, I had to put on a false smile, and I was constantly on edge, trying my best to gather evidence to bring him down. And now he was telling me that I was pregnant. I was supposed to give birth to a child for my enemy. For a ruthless killer, this child completely threw my plans into disarray. I was determined to collect evidence and bring him to justice, and I definitely didn't want a burden like a child. I suddenly remembered the birth control pills I had secretly taken. Matthew had replaced my kills. He had deceived me. I felt like vomiting and was filled with nausea. I became depressed, refused to eat, and hid in my room even when Matthew talked to me. I ignored him. I used to be so submissive. But now I'm extremely resistant. I said, do whatever you want, Matthew. Just like before, you can press me into the water tank, lock me in a cage, scold me, or hit me, it doesn't matter. I will never have your child. Matthew's eyes were as cold as stars. And he gritted his teeth and said, Aurora, you turn your back on people without a second thought. You have to have this child whether you like it or not. This is the crystallization of our love. Do I have any love for him? I turned over in bed and faced away from Matthew, not even glancing at him. Matthew started smashing things behind me. He shattered the expensive vases and ornaments in my room. He had eagerly given them to me in the first place, and now he was destroying them. There was something really wrong with him. I just refused to eat. When he tried to feed me, I spat the food on the floor. I looked at Matthew with hatred in my eyes. In the end, he was driven crazy by me. He said, Aurora, what on earth do you want? I replied, Matthew, why are you panicking? When I was locked in the cage and starved for 3 days before, I was still fine. Matthew straightened his back. Standing in front of me at 1.9 meters tall, his shadow almost engulfed me, gritting his teeth. He said, Aurora, I'll kneel down for you, just take one bite of the food. Okay? Don't you know there's a child in your belly? Of course I knew. I knew my body better than anyone. But I just couldn't bring myself to feel any love for this child. Its arrival was forced by its father. Matthew controlled everything about me, and I had no way to prevent this pregnancy at all. I said, then kneel. With a thud, Matthew immediately dropped to his knees. The 1.9-meter tall man kneeling on the ground looked like a bear. And it was really ridiculous. He held up the bowl of porridge while kneeling and said, Aurora, you're heartless. Are you going to eat or not? I ate it. My period of depression was just the beginning. The real gift was waiting for him at our wedding. How ridiculous Matthew was. He ignored the law. Yet he nervously, unhesitantly wanted to have a legally recognized marriage with me. He didn't even need to go to the Civil Affairs Bureau. He just found someone to stamp the marriage certificates for us. Matthew never dreamed that I had hidden that video for 3 years. I had kept it from my sister's phone. He had destroyed all the other copies. But he never expected that I, as the victim, still had it in my hands. Matthew had spent a long time preparing for the wedding. He had even gone to France specially to order the diamond ring and the wedding dress for me. He was so full of anticipation. He even absurdly wanted to play the game of picking up the bride. He left me in another villa and drove a luxury car to pick me up. He made it so grand and announced in front of everyone in Shangcheng that I was his wife. I played that video at the wedding. All the guests were stunned into silence, but I laughed heartily on the wedding stage. Matthew smashed all the screens at the wedding in his anger. He even wanted to shoot the person who had played the video. The wedding was completely ruined. Matthew, dressed in a suit and with red eyes, asked me, "Can't we start over?" I pointed at the video and laughed. Ask him. What do you think? Matthew's eyes were uncontrollably red. He asked me, "So what on earth should we do?" Then, Matthew slowly squatted down, covered his face, and let out a low growl like a wild beast. Tears streamed down from between his fingers at this moment. He no longer seemed like the cold and ruthless Matthew, but rather like a broken boy who had lost the one he loved. Matthew had lost his dignity at this moment. Matthew became the laughingstock of Shen Chang, although no one dared to laugh at him to his face. I ignored Matthew. He tried many ways to please me. He gave me his credit card and told me to go buy jewelry and clothes. I didn't want to go at first. But then I thought that since his money was there, I might as well spend it. The more I could take from him, the better. I was in a cold war with Matthew when I went out to buy jewelry on my own. Matthew would definitely send bodyguards to follow me. I was familiar with their faces. Afraid of making me angry, Matthew sent Nathaniel to keep an eye on me. Nathaniel was supposed to be sitting in the office handling household registration matters, but he didn't dare to refuse Matthew. So he timidly trailed behind me, trying not to be noticed by me. I still found out about him. I was angry. So I called him over and said, "Matthew asked you to follow me, right? Then don't hide anymore. Just follow me and accompany me while I shop." I was deliberately trying to anger Matthew. The more he didn't want me to get close to other men, the more I would do so. Nathaniel hung his head and didn't dare to say anything. I casually handed him the receipt and said, "Go and swipe the card." Nathaniel took the receipt and went to swipe the card. He hurried back after swiping it and showed me the receipt. I didn't have a good impression of the people around Matthew. I took the receipt casually, but suddenly I was stunned. There was a piece of paper lightly pasted on the back of the receipt. It said, "I know you hate Matthew, to please help me." I suddenly looked up at Nathaniel. There was still a timid and honest expression on his face. But his eyes were incredibly bright. Looking into those eyes, I carefully crumpled up the paper and stuffed it into my sleeve, then nodded slightly without showing any emotion. Matthew's bodyguards were waiting for me outside the store. I said, "Nathaniel, I was just thinking of buying some clothes for Matthew. You two have similar body shapes. Try them on, and I'll see if they're suitable." Nathaniel nodded meekly. After he went into the fitting room, I walked towards the direction of the restroom and then slipped into the fitting room using the blind spot. In the narrow fitting room, I could hear Nathaniel's slow and steady breathing. I lowered my voice and said, "What's going on with that note of yours? I attended your wedding with Matthew. That's when I realized that you're on my side. I'm an undercover police officer. We've been investigating Matthew's collusion with drug dealers. But we don't have the evidence yet. I need evidence to arrest him." To make a long story short, Nathaniel's former cowardly expression had vanished, replaced by determination and calmness. "I feel the same way as you do. I want to kill Matthew every single moment. What do you need me to do for you?" I asked. Nathaniel looked at me and said, "According to my investigation, Matthew has an important deal in a week. Can you go with him?" Nathaniel said it with some hesitation. He knew that Matthew had feelings for me, but he couldn't be sure that Matthew would take me along. Matthew was extremely cautious without evidence. There was no way to arrest Matthew. I had to find a way to get to the deal site. Since it wasn't going to work out just arguing with Matthew like this, I'd had to swallow my pride for now. I asked Nathaniel to buy me 2 bottles of wine and put some sleeping pills in it. Matthew had an excellent tolerance for alcohol and it was usually hard to get him drunk. That night, when Matthew came back, I was waiting for him on the sofa. Matthew came in carefully. Afraid of waking me up, he was startled when he saw me and asked, "Why aren't you sleeping?" I frowned and said, "Why are you back so late?" My tone was impatient and angry. Nathaniel said that when a man has a cold war with his woman, he's likely to find comfort with other women. "Did you do that too?" As I spoke, I stood up and grabbed his tie, my tone extremely unfriendly. "Matthew, you've ruined me. And now you want to go after other women?" My series of accusations left Matthew stunned for a moment. In an instant, he understood what I meant. Instead of getting angry, he was delighted. He held my hand in return and said, "Aurora, you're heartless. Who else could I have but you?" I wriggled in his arms and pretended to be angry. "How would I know? You're Matthew after all." As I spoke, I sniffed the scent on his body. the smell of infidelity. When Matthew saw my kitten-like actions, he burst into laughter right away. He hugged me and said, "Aurora, you're jealous. I love it so much." I ignored him, picked up the glass of wine on the table, and was about to drink it, looking as if I was going to drown my sorrows in alcohol. Matthew reached out his long arm and snatched the glass from me. He frowned and said, "You're pregnant, Don Drink." Then he drank the wine in the glass in one gulp. I reached out to grab the glass again. Matthew teased me on purpose, holding the glass in his mouth and not giving it to me. I pretended to be angry, picked up the bottle on the table, and poured the wine directly into my mouth. Matthew's expression changed instantly. His face darkened, and he tried to pry my mouth open. I immediately kissed Matthew, and all the wine in my mouth went into his. At such a close distance, I could almost see the fine fuzz on Matthew's face. His pupils were dilated, looking like a dazed snake. Matthew cursed me as a little rascal, but still held me tightly. I was very enthusiastic and let Matthew carry me back to the room. After this incident, Matthew and I made up, and we returned to our former intimacy. I began to act jealous and suspicious, but Matthew surprisingly liked it. 2 days later, when I was going downstairs, I suddenly had a stomachache and fell down the stairs. I desperately tried to grab something, but my arm got scratched and required 3 stitches. Nathaniel took me to the hospital when Matthew saw me. His heart seemed to break. He said hatefully, "I'm going to blow up that staircase, and those bodyguards too. How were they keeping an eye on you?" I said, "It's all your fault." My stomach suddenly hurt. "It must be because of what you did the other day." Matthew felt a bit guilty. He rubbed my stomach and said cautiously, "I'm sorry." During the first 3 months of my pregnancy, Matthew had been quite rough with me like this. Matthew asked the doctor, and the doctor almost scolded him to death. "How could you be such a husband? Don't you know that you can't have sexual intercourse during the first 3 months of pregnancy?" Fortunately, the pregnant woman is okay this time. If someone else had scolded Matthew like this, Matthew might have shot them. But this time, Matthew hung his head and admitted his mistake meekly, like a schoolboy who had done something wrong. Since Matthew had made a mistake and felt guilty, when he told me that he had to go away for a while, I pretended to be angry. "I want to go with you." Matthew looked hesitant, but I clung to him. "I'm pregnant. How do I know if you'll fool around with other women while you're away? We're husband and wife. Is there anything I can't be part of? I'm Mrs. Smith after all," I said, holding my head high. The title of Mrs. Smith made Matthew overjoyed. He took me to the drug lord's deal site. He was still a bit weary when we got there and confiscated my phone, but he didn't know that the undercover police officer beside him had given me a bard, which was hidden in my brooch. That red rose brooch was a gift from Matthew to me. He had spent a fortune having it custom made in France. He would never have imagined that the gift he gave me to win my favor would be the weapon to bring him down. When the drug lords saw me, their expressions froze, and they showed dissatisfaction, looking ready to act up. Matthew glared at them, and the people around him all took out their guns. Matthew's face was stern, and his voice was firm. "This is my wife, Aurora. If you recognize me, you have to recognize her too." After that statement, the drug lords relaxed and started the deal procedure as usual. I leaned against Matthew, pretending to be considerate and dependent. In the middle of it, I yawned and deliberately called out, "Matthew." Matthew leaned slightly towards me and lowered his voice, saying, "Aurora, it'll be over soon. I didn't want to bring you here because I was afraid you'd get bored." I let out a soft snort and deliberately played with Matthew's fingers, intertwining them with mine. Matthew managed to keep a composed expression on his face, but the tips of his ears instantly turned a vivid shade of red, betraying the fluster he was trying so hard to hide. He was clearly a person who had killed countless people. Yet at this moment, he was like an innocent young boy. All the conversations were recorded in my brooch when we got back. I casually threw the brooch aside. Nathaniel would find a way to get it. With the evidence collected, the arrest operation began. Matthew had been entrenched in Shangcheng for years, and he had committed countless heinous acts. Finally, retribution came for him. One night, I was jolted awake by violent shaking. When I opened my eyes, Matthew was lifting me up in his arms. There was no sign of panic on his face, but he held a gun in his hand and his tone was authoritative. "Aurora, come with me," he said firmly before I could respond. He grabbed my wrist with one hand and, holding the gun in the other, forced me to follow him. I knew that the police were coming to arrest Matthew. He clearly had a backup plan and I couldn't let him get away. Matthew quickly put on my shoes for me and then grabbed my hand, pulling me towards the study. When we reached the study, he opened the safe. I thought he was going to take some jewels or something, but instead, he stuffed a paper-folded rose into his breast pocket after that. Holding the gun in one hand and gripping my hand tightly with the other, he rushed towards the garage. The SUV in the garage was brand new, and its windows were made of bulletproof glass. The moment I got into the car, a deafening explosion sounded behind us. I turned my head and saw a violent explosion inside the villa we lived in. Self-destruct system. Matthew explained briefly. We sat in the SUV, and Matthew turned the steering wheel, driving towards a jungle village 5 kilometers away. In the dimly lit car, only his rapid breathing could be heard. Once we reached the edge of the forest, the car couldn't go any further. Matthew opened the car door and helped me out. I raised my head and was greeted by a vast jungle. This place was close to the tropics, and the trees were all in thick, blocking out the sky. Matthew pulled me through the jungle. Holding the gun, he said, "A little further and we'll reach the border. We're going to escape the country." Matthew didn't ask why he was being hunted by the police. He seemed to understand everything. He glanced at me, his eyes filled with bitterness. "I'm now a wanted criminal in the country, Aurora. You're with me, and you have to make it up to me." The jungle was extremely hot. The path was full of branches, roots, and layers of silt, making it difficult to walk. I wasn't in good health, and I was out of breath after just a few steps. I sat down on the ground and refused to move any further. But Matthew carried me on his back. His broad and sturdy shoulders supported me. And every step he took was heavy, with his shoes creaking as they stepped on the branches. Leaning on his back, I asked, "Matthew, how long will it take us to get there?" Matthew replied, 2 days. I'll carry you, and you won't be tired." Matthew carried me all night. In the evening, he took out a piece of chocolate and stuffed it into my hand. It was the only piece of chocolate, and I had casually put it in his pocket the day before. I asked Matthew, "What about you? What will you eat?" Matthew wiped the sweat from his forehead and said, "I'm not hungry." Due to the long lack of water and food, Matthew's lips were dry and even had some bloodstains. Under the moonlight, he didn't complain at all, but his determined face showed a hint of tenderness. I was calculating when the police would find me and felt a sense of anxiety rising in my heart. Was Matthew really going to escape? Suddenly, a bird seemed to be startled and took off with a flap of its wings. A loud chorus of chirping filled my ears. Rapid footsteps could be heard in the distance. Matthew's face changed. He suddenly picked me up and ran quickly towards the distance. The police had found us. Bang! The sound of a gunshot woke me up. Matthew quickly shielded me with his body, his shoulder tilted. And he was shot in the right shoulder. Several beams of flashlight light shone towards us, and I was momentarily blinded. Matthew used his uninjured hand to protect my eyes. Squinting, I saw Matthew force a smile. It was such a complex smile, desperate, cold, and menacing. "I underestimated you, Nathaniel. I thought you were a coward," Matthew said. Nathaniel, wearing leather boots, walked over and pointed his gun at Matthew's head. "You underestimated justice," Nathaniel said, gripping the pistol firmly. His face was determined, and his eyes were calm. A strong smell of blood filled my nose. Blood continuously seeped out from Matthew's shoulder through his clothes and flowed down, instantly staining the paper. Rose into his chest, a gaudy and sorrowful red. Matthew still didn't let go of my hand. Nathaniel motioned for me to come over. Matthew's stark eyes stared at me without moving. There was no surprise, no anger at being betrayed, and no curses. Instead, he looked at me calmly. He asked me softly, "Now, you've avenged yourself." Before I could answer, Matthew asked again, "Did you ever love me?" His lips were tightly pursed, as if he was eagerly awaiting my answer, yet also seemed to already know it. I bit my lip. Matthew didn't wait for my reply. He gave a bitter laugh, as if he had already expected the answer. He seemed to relax, and his previously tense shoulders slumped a little. Suddenly, Matthew raised his left hand. I didn't know when he had switched the pistol from his right hand to his left. I remembered that Matthew was an excellent marksman and was proficient with both hands. I immediately tried to lunge forward to grab the gun from him, but Matthew suddenly pointed it at my forehead. Matthew's lips were trembling, and his face was filled with despair. "Aurora, I'll kill you first. Will you die with me?" he said. I calmed down and didn't move. I replied, "Okay." I knew Matthew wouldn't kill me. At the end of his life, he pointed the gun at me, hoping that I would say no, like I used to. "Aurora, will you marry me?" "No." "Aurora, will we live together in the future?" "No." "Aurora, please don't die." This time, Matthew didn't want to hear the answer yes. He didn't want me to die because he knew that I had never truly gotten over what happened to my sister. The first person I wanted to take revenge on was Elena. The second was him. And the third was myself. I had long since been prepared to die. He wanted me to live a good life and wanted me to promise that I wouldn't commit suicide after his death, but I just wouldn't do as he wished. As soon as I said that, Matthew took a deep breath, and his tone became stern and forceful. "Aurora, don't die. If you do, I'll haunt you in hell." After saying that, Matthew suddenly pushed me towards Nathaniel on the opposite side. Nathaniel's arm instinctively caught me. I stood beside Nathaniel and looked at Matthew, who was sitting under the tree across from us. He had lost a lot of blood, and his face was deathly pale. Looking like a trapped beast, however, his strong, broken eyebrow was still furrowed tightly. He raised his gun in my direction and shouted, "Aurora, close your eyes." "Nathaniel, cover her eyes for me." Before I could say anything, Nathaniel's hand suddenly covered my eyes in the darkness. I heard a gunshot then. Nathaniel covered my eyes and made me turn around. I heard a commotion, and someone whispered, "Matthew is dead." I forced myself to smile. Nathaniel's hand rested on my shoulder. He said, "Aurora, you're crying."